Before the end of the Vietnam War, more than 3,000 orphans were airlifted out of Saigon and delivered to the arms of waiting couples in the West. It was the largest act of adoption in history.
The reason that we adopted was to provide a home and love. There was a need there, and we really wanted to meet that need. And that's what we were guided by.
Sometimes I wish that I was never adopted, because I do feel that it has messed up my life, and being confused and not knowing.
Tan Son Nhut Airport, Ho Chi Minh City. Christina and I are daughters of Vietnam. She an orphan and I a refugee. We were both uprooted from Saigon as the city collapsed into the hands of the North Vietnamese in April 1975.
Welcome to Vietnam. Yeah, your birth country. So what part are we in now? This is Coast or Saigon. This is really, yeah. I don't know what district we're in. Cái này quận mấy vậy em?
Christina was one of 280 orphans brought to Australia for adoption as part of Operation Babylift. 30 years on, she's back in her birth country, searching for who she is and for a mother that she has never known.
I can't believe they don't wear helmets or anything. And there's no speed limit, nothing.
I was more fortunate. My family managed to stay together when we escaped Vietnam. Like Christina, I'm also on a journey to understand what happened in the last days of the war that had such a huge impact on my life and Christina's. By early 1975, South Vietnam was falling apart. American troops and their allies had pulled out 2 years before. Bitterly opposed to each other, the North and South fought on. As it became clear the North was going to win, the southern city of Saigon was gripped by panic. The South Vietnamese began to flee, and the future of thousands of abandoned children tugged at the world's conscience.
Saigon had swollen, the population had swollen. There were children who had lost their parents, parents who had lost their children. So to call these children orphans wasn't by any means accurate. Some of them, I guess, were, but many of them had simply been put in orphanages by their parents in the hope that that would somehow save them from a worse fate.
Tại sao mà miền Nam Việt Nam có nhiều mồ côi, em bé mồ côi? Là vì là chiến tranh, cho nên là có một số binh lính chết thì con của họ trở thành mồ côi. Và vì chiến tranh cho nên có một số người thường dân chết và con của những thường dân cũng trở thành những đứa bé mồ côi.
Australians had been adopting a small number of Vietnamese orphans from the late 60s. Now they wanted to do more.
I'd been to Vietnam. I'd seen the mixed-race children born as a result of troops in that country from other countries. I'd seen the inability of those children to find acceptance in that society. I'd seen children that seemed to me to be born to die. They were so malnourished that they weren't going to survive.
I guess it was what was coming through in the media. I mean, that was how we were given our information, through the newspapers and through the television. Those types of pictures just were filling our screens, were coming into our houses and filled us with so much longing to be able to do something.
Freya and Peter Bolt already had a special relationship with Vietnam. They had adopted Kim, a mixed-race Vietnamese orphan, in 1973.
Things in Vietnam just seemed to be getting worse and worse. It was like that stranglehold noose was coming closer to Saigon. And we knew that we wanted to try again. Maybe it was possible to get another child.
These children must be some of the happier Vietnam orphans. At least they're reasonably secure here in Saigon, but their future is absolutely uncertain.
In March 1975, the South Vietnamese position became desperate. Key bases in Da Nang and Nha Trang fell to the northern forces. Australian Elaine Moyer worked in orphanages in Saigon throughout the war.
It became very urgent to get the children out after the fall of Da Nang, because I thought, if that's what it's like, evacuating a big city in a crisis situation, in a war, imagine what it's going to be like on Tan Son Nhut Airport trying to evacuate Saigon. It will be a nightmare.
As it became clear that Saigon couldn't last much longer, lobbying began to convince the Australian government to evacuate Vietnamese orphans.
Commercial aircraft were stopping, all sorts of things were coming to an end. And we then really ratcheted up the pressure.
Do you sell the SIM cards for mobile phone so I can call Australia? Australia. SIM card to go on the mobile
It's our
phone.
second day in Ho Chi Minh City. Christina is settling in. She's been looking forward to this journey for a long time.
Olivia, you want a Nutella sandwich?
Yes, please, now.
Christina was 6 months old when she was adopted by a South Australian family. She knew nothing about her background, only that she was left at a hospital in Vietnam.
My upbringing wasn't that great. There was a lot of arguments, especially in my teenage years, because a lot of the times I felt very unwanted. As much as I love my mum, and I do, and I'm grateful, but that's how I felt.
We were going to do that.
A single mother to her daughter Olivia, Christina began her search 3 years ago. She obtained her adoption papers from the state government.
When I got these documents and I saw where it said mother's name, and it had Wen Thi Lan, it was like, wow, I do have a biological mum. She is out there. I actually have a name to her. So I gathered all the hope from there, from that name on that paper.
Christina placed an article in Ho Chi Minh City's main newspaper, looking for her birth mother. From the many responses she received, 2 people stood out: a woman who could be her mother and a man claiming to be her father.
I think that if I request a DNA, they will be offended, but that's the only way
for me, in my mind and my heart, that it's going to prove anything, and I'm not going to let them claim that they're my parent or whatever without that testing. And if I don't want to do it, then that's up to them. Then I'll walk away.
Well, we'll see you when you get back.
Definitely. Thank you for coming.
The following day, Christina left for Vietnam. Her need to find her original family is by no means unusual for adoptees from the Vietnam War. For those that I've met through Operation Babylift, many had reached a point in their lives where they feel the strong desire to find out more about their past.
There.
Martine was an 8-year-old child when she too came on Operation Babylift.
Exhale.
These days, she's a naturopath in South Australia. She made her own trip back to Vietnam 10 years ago.
It would start off with like a yearning inside. This yearning was getting stronger, like coming up to my 28th birthday. I felt like I needed to connect with my roots and with my past, and I felt comfortable with just going just to do that, to connect with Vietnam. And the thought of like finding, my Vietnamese family seemed like nice, but I didn't know if that could be a possibility. My dad had said to me a few times, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. I always knew that I would have to go back to perhaps find a part of me, even the part that's like stopped growing by 8 years old. All the emotions that I had to embrace, like feeling abandoned, unloved or not wanted. That process was having to look at myself.
But not all adoptees from the Babylift want to explore their past. Shane is content with his Australian life.
I definitely don't want to search for my parents because it's just a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. I'm just happy with the way things are now. I'd like to go back to Vietnam and have a look at the culture and the people and know where I came from, but as far as finding my parents, it's not a high priority at all. Even if you find your parents, that's awesome, but then what do you do when you find them?
Shane was 6 months old when he was adopted by the Bolt family, their second Vietnamese baby.
We were actually the first family to adopt from Vietnam in Western Australia. There was a reluctance for inter-country adoption, and I think one of the things that was felt was that it was all happening very quickly and that adoption is not an emotive issue, that it has to be well thought out and everything done correctly. And a part of that is true, but we were also fighting against time.
Christina's search for her birth mother has begun in earnest. We decide to visit the hospital where she was left as a baby.
I was trying to picture just myself as a little baby left on the doorstep. Was I left on that step? Was I left on that step? Was I wrapped up in a blanket? Who found me? How long was I left for on the step before somebody saw me there? So that was pretty hard.
It has my Vietnamese name and I think my mother's name there. I'm trying to look for my birth mother. Maybe if there was any records of her.
Yeah. Medical records is we cannot keep long time, because after 15 years we need...
I wish she could have told me that my files weren't thrown away or whatever, but I mean, it's not her fault.
With the war closing in on Saigon, some parents were forced to make heartbreaking choices. Martine's mother made such a decision, changing her daughter's life forever.
I was running around the streets as I always did, playing with all the other kids, and these two ladies appeared. My mother and them talked for a little while, and then my mother said to me, "Oh, go with these two aunties, you know, you're going shopping with them for the day." And so, just obeyed.
Cái là cái lúc nó đi là tôi còn nhớ hiện là như là mới đây 22 tháng 12 1974 là cái ngày đó là tôi cho người ta đi, đem nó đi. Chiến tranh tới làm ăn không được, mua bán thì ế ẩm, thì một mình mẹ cha cũng là tôi bảo quản cho hai đứa nhỏ thì tôi làm sao mà sống nổi.
We were walking down a railway track and one of the ladies picked me up and was like carrying me, and my mother walked a certain way, and then at a point my mother sort of turned around and started to walk back, and I can remember I was just, holding this lady like this and just watching my mother just slowly disappearing. That was actually the last time I saw her.
Cái ý đầu của tôi là cho người ta bảo quản nó trong cái lúc chiến tranh. Người ta có điều kiện hơn tôi, cho giữ con tôi mà cho đất xây tròn trước sau gì cũng gặp. Thí dụ như mà họ có di chuyển đi đâu thì con tôi nó cũng lớn rồi, nó cũng biết tìm về tôi chứ.
Martine was placed in a Saigon orphanage.
Life just sort of moved on, and I sort of can't remember really questioning, like asking anyone, where's my mum or where's my sister? I just got on with life, with the new situation in the orphanage.
By late March, the South Vietnamese government has less than a month to live.
The cities of South Vietnam were falling like the proverbial Southeast Asian dominoes all the way down towards Saigon, until only really Saigon stood alone.
The Australian Embassy began preparing Canberra for the consequences of the Communist victory.
I foresee a torrent of demands from a wide range of Vietnamese, very many of whom will request evacuation or migration to Australia on humanitarian grounds. I sense a very large and complicated political issue here. Price.
Nobody knew how far away the troops were. And the rumours, the terrible rumours about all the monstrous things that the communists would do.
The Vietnamese people were very scared of whatever change was about to happen. Whether they had justification for that was hard to say, but there was no doubt they were very frightened of a takeover by the Northern government. And especially those who'd worked for the Australians or the Americans, they felt that they would be targeted when the regime changed.
It appeared at that stage, and I think later proved by the cables and some of the documents that I've seen, that Gough Whitlam and the Australian government did not want a big surge of Vietnamese refugees coming into the country either before the fall of Saigon or after it. International pressure was mounting on various countries, including Australia, that the international community should be doing something about the orphans in Saigon.
The United States then made an announcement.
I have directed that money from a $2 million special foreign aid children's fund be made available to fly 2,000 South Vietnamese orphans to the United States as soon as possible.
President Ford's approval of the American Babylifts changed the political climate overnight.
The Americans started airlifting lots of orphans to the United States, seemingly without any problem. Australian couples in Australia were demanding of the government, why is it that the Americans can do these things so easily, yet we don't seem to be able to do that.
With the Americans setting the pace, the Australian government followed.
What appeared to be the political acceptable solution from Canberra was, we'll bring back a whole group of orphans, and we will be seen to be acting humanitarianly, and we will get a lot of the critics off our back who are saying that we're not doing enough.
We are proceeding as quickly as we can with preparations for evacuation, that we have no hope of completing formalities such as medicals if we are to move children in the next few days. Price.
Takeoff for the Australian Babylift was set for the following day.
We had been told that we were to take out in excess of 200 babies or children. We landed in Saigon on the military side of the airport, and it was just thousands of aeroplanes. They were just row after row after row, wingtip to wingtip. We got word that the first of the buses were coming through the gates of the airport. It was probably overwhelming, but you didn't have time to stop and think about it. We had to get them off that bus and into the aeroplane and secured somehow so that they weren't thrown around if we hit any turbulence on takeoff and landing.
We'd packed the babies in cardboard boxes because it was such a good way to transport them onto the plane. We'd piled them all up in the bus and finally ready to go. And as we got to the gates of Tan Son Nhut, there was a guard there and they'd closed the gates and they wouldn't let us in.
We were at the airport filming an Australian RAAF Hercules leaving for Australia, also loaded with orphans. We just turned around and there was this massive pall of black, thick smoke. Then we saw helicopters.
One of the American Babylift flights had crashed, killing over 100 children.
On the day we found out that the airlift was to take place, I was out having dinner with another adoptive family who were expecting their child on the airlift, when we heard on the ABC News that a plane had gone in. So we were petrified. Shortly after that, we got a message from the Australian authorities saying it had been an American plane and ours had left for Bangkok safely.
The crash had thrown Saigon Airport into a crisis. Officials suspected a communist attack, but it was a tragic accident caused by mechanical failure.
Cái mà tôi nhớ nhất là cái vụ máy bay rơi làm chết mấy trăm cháu. Cái đó nó gây một cái xúc động lớn trong chúng tôi. Thế còn lúc bây giờ tôi bị cuốn hút vào trong cuộc tấn công vào Sài Gòn, để thử ra những cái sự kiện như thế thì chỉ biết qua loa thôi.
Eventually, when we got through the gates, all the other planes had taken off. We were the last flight to take off.
When we got to Bangkok, we were assisted by the embassy staff, which was a great relief to have somebody else there to help us, because by then 87 babies needed to have their nappies changed. So we gave them more to drink, and dehydration was a major problem. We were in the tropics.
Martine vividly remembers the Babylift flight. She was 8 years old.
I remember all holding hands and running across the tarmac, and I remember the tarmac was boiling hot on my feet. And then, of course, I got onto the plane and we got given food, and there were beds for all the kids, and it just seemed like a huge room full of orphans again, but on an aeroplane this time.
I just remember watching the aircraft touch down and thinking, my God, we made it. And then watching all the children come out with people carrying the babies, and the older ones standing there looking stunned. They'd been through a lot. Part of the quarantine station sort of became a mini hospital instantly, and babies went into clean cots and chaos became order.
Operation Babylift was a success, but some worried for the future.
one hopes we're doing the right thing and bringing them over.
What makes you think you might not be doing
well,
right?
We're taking them out of their environment. We're taking them away from the people they know, from the language, the culture they understand. And one just hopes that they'll find good homes.
Christina is about to meet the first of two people claiming to be her parents. Mr. Tor responded to the article in the local newspaper about Christina's search. He believes he is her father because of her Vietnamese name.
Chữ Thọ đây là Diễm. This is Mr. Thọ. Ông Thọ. Dạ. Chú vô trong ngồi được không? Vô trong ngồi được.
Mr. Tor was fighting with the South Vietnamese Army in 1975 when his wife and two children disappeared. After the war, he searched for his family in vain. For the next 3 decades, he lived alone.
Thì chú thấy nó
giống cái chung mày nó giống
ai?
Giống tôi.
When I asked you to ask him if he wants to ask me something and he said, well, no, because my daughter's come back home now, that killed me. But it killed me in the sense that I felt so sad for him, you know, and I don't believe that he's my father. I just don't think he is. I mean, if he works out to be, that's great, but I'll still long to look for my mother more.
Mum and sister and her family, and that's her husband, that's my...
Martine had more luck with her search.
I could just see how my mum looks, you know, really happy to see me, and it's amazing, like when we both smiled, that we just look identical. That was just amazing. There's no denying that that's my mother. I remembered from my childhood days in Vietnam some locations, for example, the street that I lived in. I got into Vietnam, got a translator and chauffeur and asked him to find this place, and so he drove me from Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City to Bien Hoa.
Nó nhớ cái nhà mà cái hồi mà nó đi đó là cái nhà cũ. Cái nhà cũ là lúc ba mẹ con tôi còn ở đó.
This lady comes forward and says, yeah, I remember you. And yes, I know where your mother is. I'll send for her.
Cái nói, bà đánh xe đi, tôi chở bà về. Nó đúng chờ trống kìa. Tôi nói thiệt, nếu mà thiệt là mày chạy từ từ nha. Ở chừng tôi té, tôi chết, không gặp được con cao. Ý, nó giỡn vậy đó.
And then this woman just came right at me and touched me and whipped off my sandal and was looking at my toes, and I thought, well, this has got to be my mother, you know, like no one would just go and do that to a stranger.
Nè, cái ngón của nó ở đây à, ba cái ngón này, cái ngón áp út này nó dở cao hơn. Tôi mới nhìn cái chân của nó là tôi biết nó, tôi mới khóc dữ.
And then my sister arrived, and I think my sister was just in shock. She just couldn't believe it, but you know, she was teary as well, and the three of us just sat together like again after 20 years of being apart.
How are you feeling?
This is the moment Christina has been waiting for, to meet the woman who could be her mother. I was feeling anxious as we searched for the house, but nothing compared to Christina. Mrs. Hung was 16 when she gave birth to a daughter after an affair with a Vietnamese married man. She named her baby Nguyen Thi Yim, which is the same name on Christina's adoption papers. Pregnancy for an unmarried woman was regarded as shameful. Keeping her daughter was not an option.
Đây là Diễm, Nguyễn Thị Diễm. Đây là cô. This is Miss Hương. Cô có muốn nói? Đây là
mừng quá, xúc động quá, giờ không biết nói gì được.
She's too emotional. She's happy, but she doesn't know what to say. I don't know what to say either. Nó cũng không biết nói gì hết trơn á.
Đáng lẽ mình lúc đó cùng chết cùng sống nên tụi con không giáo ai hết. Thật sự là không bao giờ mà con, cho nên con phải đừng bao giờ con nghĩ buồn mẹ con.
I felt a connection with Hung straight away, and and I feel that I was more emotional and more close and wanting more hope that she is my mother. I said to her that I'd spend a lot of time with her, as much time as with her, but I feel that I can't because I don't want to get attached and she's not my mum.
Con nhỏ chị của Diễm Hương hay con Quỳnh Hương á, đây một nốt, con Diễm Hương.
It's like a roller coaster, and I don't think I like that very much because just make me pretty sad,
Nó làm cho mình bị ray rứt, bị dày vò.
Operation Babylift had delivered just over 200 Vietnamese orphans safely to Australia by April 5, 1975. With the situation in Saigon increasingly desperate, a second was to begin immediately.
We were to pick up this plane from Sydney to go to Bangkok. We sat and we waited and we waited and we waited. It was nearly 7 o'clock before they told us that the flight was off. And there was no real advice as to why it was off, although there'd been some muttering that there'd been some breakdown in communication between the South Vietnamese government and our own government.
Politics intervened. The South refused permission for the second baby lift, fearing it was an admission of defeat. At the same time, the North condemned all the baby lifts as unnecessary and Western propaganda.
Tại sao mà trong một cái lúc như thế, họ để đưa mấy ngàn cháu người Việt Nam đi sang nước ngoài để làm gì? Mà bây giờ lại là các cháu lại phải trở về đi tìm bố mẹ. Và đưa đi bây giờ thì có thể nói các cháu nó gần như mất gốc cả.
For those who leave the country, not only the children, I think it's wrong to leave the country at a time when the country is difficult. Although we must face difficulty, but I think it's better to stay at home together with other people to help rebuild the country.
The South eventually withdrew their objections. The second and last baby lift was underway.
The second one, given the lessons learnt from the first uplift, was done as a purely consular exercise. Each child was documented as best we could, and at one time at least 100 of them were in my home one night. I don't know if you've ever had 100 children in your home at any one time, but believe me, that's something I've never forgotten.
The the communist forces were now on the outskirts of Saigon.
The town was quite tense, and going out to the airport in the early morning, we had to go with a police escort with a flashing blue light and all that sort of thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it to the airport. A couple of buses had arrived with all the children and the nuns and the Red Cross workers. So we're here with little children of all varying ages, from 0 to about probably 7 or 8. And they said, what are we going to do with them? And it was the usual. We're all single guys, so they said, have a baby. And we're going, oh, thank you. What do we? They said, feed it. Oh, okay. So they gave us bottled milk to feed the little ones and biscuits for the older kids. And we basically all sat under the wing of the aircraft and waited.
We didn't know at the time, but there was an enormous amount of urgency to get us down and across to 2 other Hercules that were already loaded with the children. So we sort of got out of the Hercules and pointed to run quickly over to there, and you could see smoke, which they said was from gunfire around various places around the airport.
And if the ground situation had moved a little quicker, they may never have got out.
One of the drivers that brought the babies from whatever institution they were had stopped at the side of the road, and some Vietnamese mother burst out of the bushes, opened the door and pushed the baby in. I mean, the population were desperate to try and, or give what they perceived to be their babies the only chance they had.
On April 18, just 2 weeks before the fall of Saigon, the final airlift arrived in Melbourne with 78 orphans.
It was a very foggy morning in Melbourne. The sickest babies were being taken off first. There were a fleet of ambulances waiting, and we set off for Fairfield. From then on, the work really started with all the medical treatment and the examinations that had to go on for the next week or so.
I remember the day that we went to the airport, and we had some baby clothes with us, and we waited, and everybody came off the plane and didn't see any baby, and we waited, and we thought, well, the plane's empty. Where is this baby? And then finally a stewardess came, and she was carrying a little bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket, and she said, are you Mr. and Mrs. Bolt? Here's your baby. And she just handed him over to us. And there was this tiny, very serious-looking baby, and he was ours.
I remember the first moment of lying in a Western bed, like a soft mattress with blankets and pillows, and I was used to the hard floor, and it felt so bizarre because, you know, I had never experienced that. Tiny little things like that was what I have to compare from my old life to my new life. Things like television, watching the early bird show on TV, that was like a significant moment in my life, believe it or not.
Imported squid, and I'm just going to do it up with a bit of balsamic vinegar and Barbie.
Shane spent his childhood surrounded by love and support from his large adoptive family.
I grew up in a family of 7. If anything, I remember like my older brother Peter when we were in school, and if he was around at the time and he heard someone bullying me or whatever, he'd stick up for me and, you know, come over and help me out. And that was always the kind of philosophy I think the whole family had. It was quite a comfortable situation, I guess.
In Western Australia at that particular time, there was a political group that would post a lot of anti-Asian posters and stickers around the place. So we'd go, all of us, all 7 of us, and we'd go with a few buckets and scrapers, and when we saw them, we'd scrape them off, or we'd alert the council, and we took that personally.
So as soon as we'd see a post that had anything remotely like Asians go home on it, it was, right, stop the car, get out, yeah, take it down.
whatever slur was against the Asians or was against our children. So we had to stand up for that, and that's what we did.
That used to make her blood boil. Yeah, I remember that very well.
Mrs. Hung has fully embraced Christina as her daughter and wants to take her shopping.
I felt pretty attached to her already. Today she said to me, "I love you very, very much." She asked me to call her mother, in Vietnamese, and I did agree to it. I'm not sure whether that's the right thing or not, but seeing how happy she is when she's with me, it makes me feel very wanted and very special. I haven't asked myself, is she or isn't she? I still have to do the DNA testing. So.
For you and Gwen and you, all right?
I was very angry at my birth mother for giving me up because I hated a lot of my growing up. I was very angry and resentful. We don't have really many relatives and we're not that close, and that's what I long for, a big close family.
You're going to spend tomorrow with Mr. To. Do you think it's something that you want to do?
I sort of feel sorry for him and would like to make him happy. But I also want to do it because I want to see if I can feel throughout the day some sort of connection and get more of an understanding of how these people's lives have been.
It's from Miss Hung. She's Mr. To's sister, and she says she's got nothing to give you, really, but it's only a very small present for you to remember them, souvenir.
I will remember her.
Chừng nào thí dụ như cháu nó có muốn tìm thêm công tích của cha nó thêm thì
cho nó mình như vậy.
Thì bây giờ nếu mà chưa tầm được phải là con.
Cũng như đi theo cũng giờ.
We are nearing the end of our trip, and so after the lunch with Mr. To and his family, Christina decides to visit an international clinic to ask about DNA testing.
Basically, it'll cost maybe just a bit over $2,000. I don't have that money, and I doubt these people do, so I don't know what to do now.
So what were you thinking when they said that was how much it costs and they can't be done here?
Well, I don't mind if it can't be done here, it has to be sent back to Australia and then I'll find the results when I'm back at home. That's fine, but it's just the cost. I can't afford that. I just don't have that money.
So what do you think this will mean for you then? If in terms of the cost is too high?
Well, then I'll never find out, will I?
Christina has to tell Mr. To about the DNA, but she can't face him.
I've switched off, as in this journey for me has been way too emotional, more than I expected, and although I've wanted it all my life, I know now that I'm honestly not ready for it. I got too attached to both families too quickly. I was prepared to not worry about the DNA because I felt a mixture of feeling sorry, a mixture of happiness because I saw them being happy, and that made me happy seeing the joy in their faces. And I thought I could deal with it, just saying, don't worry about it, whatever. But deep down, I would still never know. like how I said about the DNA testing.
Nói cái về cái vụ thử máu á.
And it costs a lot of money. It's very, very expensive.
Bây giờ cô á, thì có cái ví dụ trong trường hợp bây giờ cái lương hưu trí á, thì coi như là cô lãnh cũng khoảng được cũng 10 mấy triệu. Khi mà cuối năm mà nghỉ hưu á, cô nói cô lãnh một lần một. Sau là cô phải làm thế nào cô tự cô sống chứ cô không có nhận cái tiền lương nữa.
I know already in her heart she accepts me as her daughter and wants me to be because she's told me already, but I can't.
Tại bây giờ là cô không có khả năng và nó cũng không có khả năng, thì cô hy vọng là cô sẽ cố gắng tìm cách nào đó để một ngày nào đó là cô phải có khả năng.
Mấy trăm ngàn trẻ mồ côi. Và việc Babylift á, hoàn tất á, thì cũng chỉ đưa có 4.000 thôi. Như vậy là ta thấy rõ là cái tỷ lệ trẻ em được mang đi á, dù sao cũng rất ít. Như vậy thì số còn lại sẽ sao? Chúng đó vẫn sống tới ngày nay tại Việt Nam.
They would have still been orphans without a future. They had no education or very little education and very little prospects. So the future, they would have been the discarded ones.
Now they've been back to Vietnam and I know their situation. I know they're poor. I know their life is really hard. They have expectations of me too, just like I had of them. They had expectations that I would, provide for them, I guess, materialistically. There was like a conflict inside of me that wanted to be the dutiful daughter and do the right thing. And there was another part of me, the part that got let go of and went into a new life with a new family, that was in conflict. Whereas with my Australian family, I would probably do anything for them because of the bonding of the years that I grew up with them.
Destiny's destiny. You can fight it as much as you like, but I was lucky I got dealt a good card and got a great family whom I love heaps, and happy. Yeah, that's who I am, just happy. Always got a reason to smile until tax time.
If I think about the statements that some people make that adoption, kids would be better off in their own country, then in an ideal world, I'd say that that's absolutely right. And that, from my perspective, adoption is the second best. But we're not living in an ideal world, and we're talking about a situation where there was a war and where there were a lot of children who would not have had their biological parents. So the next best thing is to be adopted and to grow up in a family where you're loved.
When I came back, I didn't want to be here. I was really sad, and I missed Vietnam, and I wanted to go back. I rang Miss Hung quite a bit, and we've kept in contact through the computer. And she wrote me a letter. So this is the letter that she wrote, and she writes pretty good English, but I feel a connection with her. They're very lovely people, very warm, and it's just nice to know that I may have a family on the other side of the world, That's probably why I've decided not to worry about the DNA testing as much, I'm sort of just content. Yeah, I just think maybe if I did a DNA testing and it worked out, no, they're not mine, I think it would be too painful to go through it all again. And maybe I would be too scared to do it all again and then go through the same thing. Not, you know, so I'd rather just leave it.